At the beginning of June, the Ukrainian Security Service, SBU, launched Operation Spiderweb, using SBV unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, to attack 5 strategic air bases, destroying approximately 20 bomber aircraft and one A-50 early warning aircraft belonging to Russia's aerospace forces. Following the attacks on Russia's strategic air force facilities, Russia began discussing the need to use intermediate-range ballistic missiles, IRBMs, Oreshnik, to retaliate against Operation Spiderweb. Russian military experts even compiled a list of potential targets that Russia could strike with Oreshnik missiles, including the Antonov and Atom factories, the Radius military electronics production facility in Kyiv, the Microkryla factory in Dnipro, the Luch Missile Design Bureau and its assembly plant in Chernihiv, aircraft repair factories in Konotop, Lviv, and Kharkiv, the Yuzhnoye, Borodyanka, and Motor Sich aviation manufacturing complexes in Zaporizhia. To date, in response to Operation Spiderweb, Russia has conducted intense airstrikes, deploying warheads daily across Ukrainian territory, using both ballistic and cruise missiles. From Iskander system, Kh-101 strategic cruise missiles, Kh-59 air-to-ground missiles, and Kand-23 tactical missile systems, OTRK. However, more than 10 days have passed, and despite the use of various weapons and attacks on numerous targets across Ukraine, no Oreshnik IRBM has been launched. In a recent episode of What Is It on the international RTVI television channel, Russian analyst Alexander Mykolov addressed the question of why Russia has not yet used this powerful missile to punish Ukraine. Mykolov noted that the Oreshnik IRBM is a mobile ground-based missile system with an intermediate-range ballistic missile of the same name. Its existence was announced by Russian President Vladimir Putin on November 21, 2024, following a test strike on a factory in Donetsk. Mykolov pointed out that the Oreshnik IRBM cannot be used as a routine retaliatory measure. As an intermediate-range ballistic missile, each launch requires prior notification to Washington to prevent the U.S. missile attack warning system from being triggered erroneously, thus avoiding a retaliatory response to a perceived ballistic missile attack. This notification is mandatory. Failure to inform the U.S. in advance could lead to unpredictable consequences. This requirement allows Kyiv's authorities to quickly receive information from the U.S. about an impending launch and take timely measures to mitigate damage from Oreshnik. Additionally, using strategic weapons capable of carrying multiple nuclear warheads for retaliation in conventional combat conditions is not militarily practical. The Russian analyst argued that the Oreshnik IRBM is primarily designed to strike strategic underground targets that are well hidden and heavily protected. Using it against conventional surface structures is not cost-effective due to the missile's high cost. Mykolov suggested that if Russia's military operation in Ukraine escalates into a global confrontation, the use of Oreshnik IRBMs may become necessary. This implies that Moscow intends to reserve this strategic weapon for future combat operations. He emphasized, "We have not yet used Oreshnik IRBMs. We have not captured Kyiv, we have not captured Odessa, and we certainly have not attacked European countries. So why should we use these weapons?" He also affirmed that Russia's defense industry is currently producing a large number of Oreshnik IRBMs when military conditions warrant their use. President Vladimir Putin will not hesitate to issue the order. However, at present, their deployment is deemed unnecessary. On June 11th, in a speech at a government meeting on the National Armaments Program, President Putin called for special attention to the continuous development of Russia's nuclear triad. Russia's nuclear triad refers to the combination of ground-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, strategic bombers capable of carrying nuclear warheads. These weapon systems ensure that Russia's nuclear forces cannot be destroyed in a single attack. The Russian leader stated that the proportion of modern weapons and equipment in Russia's strategic nuclear forces has reached 95%. He added that Russia is making good progress in this area and claimed this is the highest level among all nuclear powers worldwide. In March 2024, U.S. Air Force General Anthony Cotton, commander of U.S. Strategic Command, offered a similar assessment. He specifically highlighted Moscow's Sarmat hypersonic ballistic missile and new submarines capable of carrying nuclear weapons. However, according to Putin, Moscow should not focus solely on nuclear weapons. He stated that the government should develop a new long-term armaments program, emphasizing the most advanced weapon systems based on lessons learned from the conflict in Ukraine. Both Moscow and Kyiv heavily rely on unmanned aerial vehicles. In the ongoing conflict, Russia's deterrence forces include a variety of strategic weapons, both nuclear and conventional, which can be used for defensive and offensive purposes. According to Russia's definition, these forces are designed to deter aggression against Russia and its allies, and to defeat an aggressor, even in a war involving nuclear weapons. President Putin has repeatedly stated that Russia's nuclear arsenal is the primary guarantor of its sovereignty, while pledging that new weapons will soon be deployed. On June 11th, the Kyiv Independent reported that U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth signaled that a reduction in military aid to Ukraine is almost certain, as he discussed the U.S. defense budget for 2026. During a congressional hearing, he emphasized that the Trump administration has a very different perspective on the war in Ukraine compared to President Joe Biden. Hegseth asserted that a peace agreement through negotiations is in the best interest of both parties and the United States. Although the U.S. Defense Secretary did not disclose specific details about the cuts, according to Ukrainian parliamentarian Irina Friz, a member of the National Security, Defense and Intelligence Committee, Kyiv has prepared mentally for the potential impact and is exploring options to address the significant support gap that may arise. Friz noted that there are several types of military aid that Ukraine cannot obtain from other Western allies, and any reduction in these would be highly detrimental. She added, "However, I believe that instead of being emotionally affected by statements like Hegseth's, Ukraine must demonstrate readiness to strengthen its defense capabilities and enhance communication with partners to continue defending its sovereignty." With Donald Trump's return to the White House, Washington has significantly shifted its policy toward Ukraine. Although Ukraine still receives military aid approved by the Biden administration and continues to share intelligence, the Trump administration has previously paused both. And in the nearly 5 months of Trump's presidency, no new aid packages have been announced. Meanwhile, Ukraine is said to be holding its ground against Russia's prolonged and gradual attacks. But any reduction in U.S. aid could impact Kyiv's counteroffensive capabilities and weaken U.S.-led peace efforts. Ukrainian parliamentarian Oleksandr Oreshnik, chairman of the Foreign Policy Committee, stated, "Reducing military support could weaken our defense capabilities. This could lead to greater losses for both our soldiers and civilians, as President Vladimir Putin prepares for a summer offensive. This move sends a wrong signal, as Putin may see it as encouragement to escalate hostilities. Since Russia launched its military operation in Ukraine, Washington has provided Kyiv with approximately $74 billion in military aid and supplied game-changing weapons for both the front lines and cities hundreds of kilometers away. Specifically, Washington has sent millions of rounds of ammunition, tanks, armored vehicles, long-range ATACMS tactical missiles, HIMARS high-mobility artillery rocket systems, and advanced Patriot air defense systems, which are the only means for Ukraine to effectively counter Russia's ballistic missiles. According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, during former U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's tenure, the U.S. committed to supplying Ukraine with 20,000 missiles to counter Shahid-style UAVs that Russia launches almost nightly into Ukrainian cities. Zelensky said in an ABC interview published on June 8th, "These are not expensive missiles, but they are specialized technology. We were counting on those 20,000 missiles." However, the Kyiv Independent reported that Ukrainian soldiers interviewed by the outlet criticized Washington's recent moves, but were not surprised. According to Bach, a sniper with special forces fighting in eastern Ukraine, the reduction in U.S. aid is detrimental to the front lines, as Ukraine relies on it, particularly U.S. intelligence. Yakov, another Ukrainian soldier fighting on the Eastern Front, agreed with Bach's view and said that the new U.S. policy will have serious consequences for global order. Amid Washington's shifting stance, Ukraine's European allies have pledged to increase military support, but continental nations face challenges due to decades of underinvestment in defense production capabilities. As a result, Ukraine is exploring other options, such as developing domestic defense production and purchasing U.S. weapons with financial support from European partners. Earlier this month, a Ukrainian delegation led by Presidential Chief of Staff Andriy Yermak visited the U.S. to discuss continued defense support and the possibility of purchasing American weapons. However, following the Ukrainian delegation's visit, no specific actions or responses have been reported from Washington regarding the provision or sale of weapons to Ukraine and its allies.